Yes, all set. Okay, we're back in session again. It's looks like it's around 7:45. Okay, we have a ordinance to go through. The first reading of ordinance number 2018-11, Economic Development Ad valorem Tax Abatement Agreement for Steamroller Studios LLC. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Sorry. Ordinance number 2018-11, an ordinance of the City of Melbourne, Florida, approving an economic development ad valorem tax exemption agreement for Steamroller Studios LLC, authorizing the mayor or designee to execute said agreement, providing for notification to the Lake County property appraiser, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing terms and conditions, providing for implementing administrative actions, conflict, severability, non-codification, correction of scrivener's errors, and effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So I'm going to bring up a series of staff members and let them kind of give you their idea or what they processed through. I think it's important to explain how we reached this point, why we're at this point, why we're looking at the economic development ad valorem tax abatement program. But I also think it's important to set some history. So Lake County adopted their program. They're really basically the city of Mount Dora also followed. Lake County reaffirmed that program in 2013. The city of Mount Dora's program is still in place. It does sunset in 2020 in November, but any program that's in place at that point in time continues to run until it completes its process. Steamroller Studios was really a project, so to speak, that we have been working at for close to a year. Having a company reside in town of their caliber and with what they bring to us, and I'm going to use Dr. Levy's comments, playing small ball in the within the community of bringing some real assets to the city, and I'll let them kind of go into that in just a second. It's vital having them here to participate and be part of our downtown during what they consider their daytime hours and their evening hours. They're being part of the community in that sense. They've reached out. They also want to be part of the community in the sense of community art. So they want to be a part of what we all as the city look at from an economic standpoint, but also a community relation and partner. So I believe they truly represent partnership. I also believe that G3 really worked with us once we identified that a couple other sources locations would not work out. We reached out to them and asked that they work with Steamrollers. They came to the agreement between the two of them, and part of this agreement is to show that that partnership was built and that we were part of that partnership. So it's to some degree in the sense of incentives. So at this time, I'd like to bring up Vince Sandersfield, let him explain to you some of the pieces and parts of this and walk you through. We'll be glad to answer any questions. I did receive 2 emails, and I believe I've answered all the questions on those emails. If during this conversation that Vince does not answer some of the questions brought up in those emails, I'll be glad to provide those to you and disclose those. Vince?
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Vince Sandersfield, Planning Director. The ordinance in front of you is piggybacking off the economic development incentive package that was done in 2012. The process is to file an application by March 1st, and then it goes on the tax roll for any sort of incentive relief. This particular ordinance was probably generated for Wolf Ranch, but it was set up for other areas as well. It could have Gold Triangle 441 or downtown or any business. That ordinance sets up specific guidelines and specific businesses. This particular one is highlighted as a target business and actually highlighted in Florida statutes. This is a media digital type incentive business, it's targeted business. So this actually fitted that criteria. Relocating a business into an existing building with a tenant space. So the agreement is with the Steamroller Studios LLC. This brings additional employees. This is a high type wage job. The wage job is defined in the ordinance with what we use for the Enterprise Florida. Lake County has their numbers. It's around 40,000. Their number is around 41. We use that as part of our calculation. They're proposing to come in about 35 new jobs within that range, and going at the Sunset Building. The location's at the corner of, as you know, Baker Street and Donnelly on the one side. They expect to be there 3 years, and so the tax abatement program sets that formula for 100%. We've outlined in the package the criteria of the employees, the high wages. Keep in mind, when we analyze this particular business, this is a game video. It's kind of the new trend you see on movies and so forth, the animation, the type of employees. These are the type of enterprises and businesses that are being promoted within that ordinance. So it meets that criteria. Adam in our office calculated through our economic development software. Those are numbers we model. So we did provide some basic discussions of how modeling of economic energy, the impact that could happen with this type of business. We look at the property tax result, those impacts. We look at what happens when the employees are in town and those impacts. So that model, is it exact science? No. But we look at the criteria, we vet through how this business fits our model, where we may want to go. Keep in mind, in the downtown, maybe this could be an expansion to Wolf Branch. This particular business with a discussion, with kind of a win-win situation of that component. So an investment, an incentive under this criteria fits that definition. The ordinance requires an agreement. The agreement is with, again, Steamroller. This is a 3-year that meets the over 10. It's a target employee. It's a digital media, as I mentioned. Your tax obligation, if so approved, is around the $30,500. We estimate the property will go up in value. The property owner is Baker GC Development LLC. They're already doing some investment to the property and doing some paintings, some awnings, doing some interior build out for the tenant. So they're already on site developing the property. That will in turn add some property value. So we're doing some estimate of what you may see for this overall project. Back to the estimated financial impact. I know on our table, ultimately in 3 years, we're saying that $8 million of sort of a business of this caliber could direct, indirect, or induce economic engine. They would have that spending power. Other folks will talk about how that engine works with having new employees of this caliber and how that works with our engine for the economy. That was calculated. Something I wanted to mention is the type of wages. Again, it's the 41,000. They indicated maybe in 2 years they'd be with new employees around 52,000 per employee. So we feel it's a win-win situation. Meets the criteria of the ordinance. I can go a little more criteria if you like, but.
Well, I'd just like to mention that the budget impact is provided to you by our finance director, as well as looking and using the software system, the IM plan or M plan. And I know that Tom is not here this evening, but I know Sheila is here representing. But Tom spent quite a bit of time going through this, making sure that these numbers matched up to something he could support and sign off on. As you notice, each package, and I just remind each of you, because we don't always mention this, that the review pie and the prepare pie on your package, on each of your memos, is listed the date that each director approves this package, stating they have reviewed it and signed off on it and will support it. And as you will notice, Tom's Clinker, our finance director interim, is approved on 6/6, and city attorney on 6/12, and so forth. So each package goes through that process, but especially for this one, because it's required as part of the ordinance requirement that he be the one to provide the financial, and the budget impact section actually does show that information, and that we just wanted to state that, because it actually doesn't clearly state that in the budget impact section, and we wanted to make sure it was known. So thank you.
So back to the ordinance, we reviewed the criteria, the process, the timeline. and how this works. So if this would go on the tax rolls, this would be next year, 2019, so approved. And then would work the 3-year commitment for the tax abatement. We kind of outlined the numbers, and again, these are estimates of what a tax could be based on the millage rate, but I think you get the picture of an incentive with the full-service video game and animation type is bringing in these type of wages and so forth. This fits the package in the ordinance from 2012. And
I believe Mr. Sumner also has some information on the incentive package.
Yes, ma'am. As well as part of this, to further expand on what Ms. Hayes said about Mr. Clinker's financial analysis of it, since Steamroller applied and their application was complete, met all the criteria, in the ordinance there's a timeline, but part of what we've done in working with them and with Dr. Levy on this project is we held back, because you saw this came in on March 1st, but they didn't want us to bring it forward until they were ready to announce that they were going to move. Part of what we've done in working with economic development projects is you have to look at how do you get them over the threshold and get them into your city. And economic development is a competitive pay-to-play business for the most part. The days of the giant mega deals are somewhat over, but any small incentive shows that company you want their investment, their employees spending their money in your city. And that's what this program is set up to do on this one. So when Mr. Clinker looked at the financial analysis, because this did come in March, they said 35 employees the day they opened the doors in Maldora. They're at 50 today. So Mr. Clinker looked at that in his financial analysis. He did take the lower wage number at $41,000. One of the specific questions we received was the discrepancy in the $41,000 and the $52,000. Quoting Mr. Myers, who's one of the executives with Steamroller, as they grow and hire more qualified, talented, higher skilled average wage increasing. So with that, we went through the process, they met the criteria of it, and one of the things that they had looked at from the economic development side of leaving where they were locating and moving here was a substantially higher lease cost. And that was one of the things they talked to Dr. Levy and Ms. Hayes about, and this grant will offset that difference in the lease cost is the intent of this program. So with that, with Vince and Dr. Levy, we'll go ahead and answer any questions that you have.
Dr. Levy?
And council members, I'm really here to answer any questions, but maybe I could just give you a couple of thoughts as this issue came to my attention today. I apologize I didn't have a chance to get home to change for you, but I wanted to be here because I recommend to clients who have mishits in when you're trying to encourage growth like this and companies to expand. So you have to be pretty careful. You have to be pretty prudent. Public resources are limited, and you have to use them in a really effective way. And in my estimation, as we've had a new city and really waiting a little bit because Wolf Branch is a big thing and it's going to take time, and there's some things we can do to kind of bring small and medium-sized companies here. This opportunity came about and was really a remarkable alignment of luck, hard work. I think you're fortunate to have this opportunity, and I think the scale of what you're doing to what you're getting is really a big spread. I think you're getting way more than you would normally see with this scale of investment. And so I want to amplify and encourage you to go through this. We looked at what it would take to, as Adam said, to get over the hump. We had to find a way to kind of lower the lease costs. And this seemed like a really good, sound economic development policy and good public policy for you, if you believe in the conversation we've been having for 9 months about what we're trying to achieve for the city. If you believe in that, then I think this falls in line. If you have some concerns and skepticism about what we've talked about, and that's really normal, and you should be, should challenge some of those assumptions, then, maybe you take a different view of this. But I think what you have in front of you tonight is consistent with what we've been talking about for about 9 months. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
For this point here, public hearing. Anybody from the public wish to address this item? Please state your name and address, please.
Michael Salerno, 354 East 10th Avenue, Mount Dora. Just for clarification, it's a 3-year agreement. And what happens if that company chooses to leave prior to the 3 years or goes out of business? What happens?
We actually have that in the agreement. Adam, can you state what that states?
If the moment the company were to cease operation, the tax abatement goes away immediately. So as long as they have to be here operational with the employees for the full 3 years to get the payments.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
Do I have to state again my name? TK Lewis, 2103 Dogwood Circle. Good evening again. I just have a question. I shop down there and travel about. I actually spend a lot of time at Magical Meat. Great place. But parking is already kind of difficult. And I'm wondering if this place, I heard at the last session that they're going to be using the church for parking, but if you have some 50-odd vehicles, does this constrain the rest of us as far as the already provisional parking situation that we have? Am I going to be able to find parking to go down to the shops that I love? And I love Mount Dora. And I know this is a new business, and sometimes big businesses always aren't the best thing that could happen to us. I'm just taking a jaundiced eye because this is what I see, and I'm of course more than ready to be corrected on this, but I have the feeling that if we can't enforce where those cars are parking, then a lot of that parking space that's already limited is going to be at a hazard. I was wondering if somebody could address that.
I'll be glad to. So I would ask first a question. Have you, when you come into town, do you drive down to Tremaine parking lot and look at how empty it is every day? And
No.
there's probably 62 spaces to 65 spaces.
I try to park
closer to the area. I understand.
where, yeah.
So at the church we have about, I believe it's about 117 spaces, of which probably 20 city employees use that because we only park here at the city in the back parking lot so that we are removed from the downtown to allow tourists and citizens.
Right.
So these employees will be asked and have been asked, and their company partners, the 3 owners, are more than willing to have their employees park at the church, as we do, and walk, and park at Tremaine and walk. And these are millenniums. This is something that they're very common, it's common practice for them, as well as these folks do not work the traditional 8 to 5 hours. So I believe that's an advantage for them. And I believe these 50 employees will probably bring to the restaurants and to our downtown boutiques something that they don't have now. And that's 50 business people in the downtown that have no connection to a restaurant or to a boutique. And that's very unique. Now we have some other businesses, but these are 50 new members that we're very excited to be a part of that. So I think if you look at those parking lots, you'll see that there's availability. There's parking spaces out there.
No, Robin, I think you made a really good point. The extra foot traffic for each of the establishments there would be a good thing. Is there any way to, is there any assurances that that kind of parking can be enforced, or is it just
Well, it's public parking, so to say it's enforced, I think
I'm
you have
just
to look
saying
at that. But keep in mind, our 4-hour parking is enforced, and our officer is here in the room. So if they park in the 4-hour parking, they're going to be enforced the same as you will be if you're in that space.
Right.
So I don't think that's as much an issue. No different than our employees can be enforced to park up at the church when they really had a right to also park on Baker. It was just a management decision to ask them to move up there. So I think as long as there's a good handshake between Adam and Keith and myself, that we'll be fine. And that's already exists. So they were thrilled to have a location to move their employees, and they had no issue with it.
Thank you for answering.
Let me just interject something real quick. If the company who owns the building were to lease it out to individual companies and would bring clients in, okay, you would probably have a lot more than maybe 20, 30 cars possibly in there, which I don't think there are going to be that many cars in there, but you would have probably more cars on a daily basis. And on the kind of business, you're going to have one business who's not going to be bringing a lot of clients in on a daily basis. They work through their phone, through their computers, and they don't bring a lot of clients in. They will come in, look at the finished product, but not as a sales type thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the public wish to address this item? Okay, and now it's time for council to make discussion. Who would like to lead off
Do we
anything?
need a motion?
No, that's that thing's here for after discussion.
Okay.
Council action, so I'll wait for that.
Thank you, Mayor. My notes tell me these things. If this concept fits precisely for the purpose of abatement of abatement of taxes for new businesses, for new enterprises coming in, that's the entire statutory formula for that purpose, is to attract business and produce the numbers of economic development for the city of Mount Dora that are shown on page 2360. Give or take a few thousand. So that's a positive to me. Tax abatement process for new businesses to me is a significant economic driver, and that's one of our strategies from an economic, these three gentlemen sitting in the front are working on as part of our team for that purpose. And so that satisfies that for me. Thirdly, this process to me is a public-private partnership concept. We're the public, they're the private, we're partnering through this abatement process. And that is another strategy we've been talking about for how many months and years. And that seems to fit nicely into that. It also fits into the concept, while this isn't in the innovation district per se, it fits within the concept of our strategies in innovation, and it also fits within our Envision plan back in 2011 or whenever that was, fits squarely into that process nicely. And the 9 months that Dr. Levy has been talking about, and I think Adam as well, about working this into getting to this stage here today is the partnership work they're doing for this city and its residents to drive that economic development. And so to look that gift horse in the mouth would be ill-advised in my opinion. So I totally support this concept, and I wish we would have more.
Mr. Massey.
I have a couple of questions and some thoughts. Do I read this correctly when I see the total of the 3-year agreement? We are waiving the city millage rate entitled to the city to a total of $30,000. Is that correct? And Adam is nodding his head affirmative. That's what I read out of it. My second question is this the first incentive package we have seen in this community development situation? This is the first one, and Adam is again.
Yes, I don't believe there's been anything else presented to you in the past. We put the ordinance in place, the county did, but we have not actually had any packages presented. And I'd just like to clarify on the 30,000, that's current number, that number could change. So
Okay, I appreciate those answers, and let me frame my thoughts. $30,000 is seed money, if you will, to attract business, and Adam has explained the concern for making adjustment for the rental part of that package, which is a good explanation. Since this is our first package, there are some things that would make it more comfortable to me if we would look at for the future. I'm an attorney, I'm a little bit anal-retentive, and that's just the nature of things. The application is not included within this package. There is no finance director's report. Those things have been reiterated in the summary, if you will, and in the presentation of our staff speakers this evening and Dr. Levy. I appreciate those things. For me, at least, it would be helpful if the application and the finance director's report were part of the package. I don't mind another 1,000 pages in the package. I need to see those things. That bothers me. I have another issue with the form of the ordinance, and this probably should go to our city attorney. Our ordinance, I'm not sure it meets the qualifications of 78-550, and let me tell you where. And again, my questions are as to form, not so much as substance. Ordinance 78-550 says the ordinance shall include, and I assume that that ordinance shall include is the ordinance that's before us today, 5 things. And those 5 things in abbreviated form are the name, address, and business to which the exception is granted. That's here. I'm happy with that. Item number 2, the amount of the total revenue available from ad valorem for the current fiscal year, the total lost in the current year by exemptions currently in effect, and the estimated loss that's attributable to this business named in the ordinance. And again, this is the first time we've done this, I believe. That information is not a part of the ordinance here, though the statute requires that it be. The third step is the amount of the exception expressed in a percentage. That's there. I'm happy with that. The fourth requirement is the period of exemption and expiration date. That's been explained in the supporting material, but it's not a part of the ordinance that we propose here, and it should be, in my view. And finally, that the finding that the business named in the ordinance meets the state statute 96.012, subparagraphs 15 or 16, the finding that the business is a qualified business. And I believe that those are the 5 essential steps that must be in our ordinance for this particular agreement. I like the agreement that you all have drafted. It appears to work very, very well for me. I'm comfortable with that. My only issue right now is the form of our own ordinance, and I'll leave that with the city attorney to sort out. But those are my concerns. Thank you for hearing me out.
Okay, well, Mr. Massey just about covered almost everything that and my concerns. I have one that is, I'm confused. So this says that this is a tax abatement agreement for Steamroller Studios, and that Steamroller has applied for this tax abatement. But when I saw the application, because I asked to see it, it's signed by Austin Gunther, who owns the building as part of the G3. Now, so is the tax abatement going to G3, or is the tax abatement going to the business that is going to be occupying the building? You know, in other words, if this is a application from a Steamroller, that's a separate business. They didn't apply for this. Austin Gunther, G3 applied for it. And so I'm confused on that. The other thing I'm confused about is, it's my understanding from our ordinance that if this business moves to the Innovation District, that they will not be able to have, if they create a new business, that they can't.
No, they can apply, they just have to expand. So they cannot apply with the current condition that they leave the city, but they could expand and then apply.
Okay, but who actually applied? I mean, Adam, you just said that this were substantially higher lease costs, and this will offset that. So is the benefit going to this animation studio business, or is it going to the landlord who owns the building?
So the tenant signed a lower cost lease based on this incentive, is the way it worked out. So they applied jointly as the tenant and the landlord applied together. So they did the paperwork together, because our ordinance requires the job creation. The landlord is not creating the jobs and the employees, the tenant is. So when our ordinance was originally created, they didn't contemplate that it would be a tenant-landlord situation. It was an owner-occupied is the way it's kind of crafted. But as I talked to Ms. Carcroft, this is the way it works in other places, and so that's why we brought it forward this way.
They actually entered it as a partnership
Yep.
in this situation, and their contract states that.
Yep.
So they are dependent on each other through this entire process.
Because if the company fails or moves out early, the tax abatement goes away.
Jennifer, would you like to explain your thought process?
It just doesn't sound, it's confusing.
Well, like I said, first one coming through, right, so we're working out the mechanics. Can you hear me? Okay. So, I did review the, applicable statutes with Adam, and, we can make those edits before the second reading with respect to our ordinance to make sure that those requirements are met, the couple that you outlined.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. And we may consider making the applicant, and the owner, the studio, the tenant and the landlord sign as part of the execution. We generally verify them on Sundays, and we sort of told them those blank.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. I'm losing my voice too. So like I said, just working through it the first time, we can make those changes. Those changes make sense and easy to do.
So I think from Ms. Tillett's perspective, she was just asking, you're stating that we would have both of them sign as if they were both okay, so it would not just be one, it would be both.
When you look at the back page of the agreement, that agreement's not final yet. You all are just approving the abatement in theory, basically, and then the agreement terms would be the agreement in theory, but the actual like nuts and bolts of it can be changed, which is why you didn't see a signature page. So we'll add the signature page with Steamroller, and then we'll also add the landlord, or I'm not sure the owner's name.
And if that's now going to be after March 1st, our ordinance says that, you know, this application has to come in before March 1st. I think, so how does
This
that?
is for next year, this is not for this
Yeah.
year. So this will, the tax abatement
they
won't
can-
apply until next year.
It doesn't happen until next.
So March 1st of 2019 will be an adequate time
Find out
for them
anything
to,
different, I
because
did
that's
ask
what,
Adam.
you know,
So this is the first reading of the ordinance. As Ms. Cockcroft stated, we'll make the revisions that have been outlined by Mr. Massey in particular and add the second signature page. If it gets approved, the abatement would go into effect for their 2019 tax bill. It would not affect their 2018 tax bill.
so the March 1st application deadline then is really relative to 2019, not 2018?
Correct, yes, correct.
Okay, it's just.
Right, because
And
typically,
they'll actually be moved in before. They start getting better.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. It's just that March 1st seems to be a date that shows up frequently, so that, you know, like the warranty deed on the building was March 1st, this was dated March 1st, it's sort of, which came first, the chicken or the egg type of thing.
so typically property appraiser, March 1st is your deadline for everything. If you have closed on a house the previous year, you have until March 1st to file for your taxes. So that's the common date that's used, so this will be applied toward this next year. So the trim notices that go out in August would reflect this, because those are truly due March 31st, or they, you know, go on sale, so to speak. So that meets that March 1st deadline.
Okay.
Just briefly to mention that the way the statute reads is that applicant is a new business or expansion of the business, and that's why it was presented to you as Steamroller Studios, not the landowner. But there's nothing wrong with making them parties.
Did you hear, I'm sorry?
Yeah, so, right, it's a new business. So I guess the question, whose checkbook is gonna be $30,000 fatter at the end of these 3 years? Is it Steamroller Studios that's getting this money, or?
No, this will be G3 for the rent, really a
So-
rent adjustment that they are
They're
making
getting
for steamrollers.
So G3 is gonna be the beneficiary of this tax abatement, and in return, they have, what, lowered the lease costs to their tenant, who is Steamroller?
Steamroller wins in the long run.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody wins, but it's just, like,
I would say this,
That's for the attorneys.
I know, but I need to understand this if you
Kind
know,
of
it's
a
my
roll
job, you
Roll down.
to figure out, to understand
Pull
this so I
down,
Sorry,
can
I'm a little.
vote.
so what they came from, steamrollers moved from a facility, which they paid next to literally nothing to rent. So one of their requirements would be that we would find them a facility or location in which they could meet the requirements of their rent until they can still, again, I don't want to say get on their feet because they're on their feet, but continue to operate and prosper. And I mean, that was a huge focus point for them. So we worked with G3 to say, okay, can you help us? And honestly, for several months, 8 weeks probably, there was a no. We can't do that. We can't get to those numbers. The program, the tax abatement, as Mr. Massey mentioned, the 30,000 really just was a small amount to help change the, yes, and for them to adjust their rent to allow steamrollers to be able to come in and move into that facility.
Mr. Tucker, so you finished right now?
I'm done.
Okay, Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, I support this 100%, but I have some major questions and concerns. Most of them have been hit home by Mr. Massey. I, like Mr. Massey, was very disappointed I didn't see the agreement, the application, not the agreement, the application. I would have liked to have had that in the packet. The other issues, again, not to belabor Mr. Massey's points because I agree with him, is that I don't like voting for something, knowing this, well, we're gonna make these changes. I'd rather see the final product in front of me, and then I'll vote for it. I know we got a second, I know we have a second reading.
That's why.
I know,
Why you have,
I know. Doesn't mean, I'm just unhappy, and not unhappy, I'm uncomfortable knowing I'm gonna vote yes for something and changes are gonna be made. And the changes, in my opinion, should have been there to begin with. I realize we're walking into kind of uncharted waters. We haven't done this before, and it's all new. But I'm uncomfortable, is the only way I can put it. And if it's the second reading has all the corrections, you got my support 1,000%. But I'm just uncomfortable with this. I was uncomfortable with the vote I did earlier tonight, and I'm uncomfortable with this vote. Knowing the changes are going to be coming. I want to see the changes first.
Just real quick, it's all part of the process, and I realize where you're coming from, okay, with the vote. The vote tonight is to move it to a second reading, okay, if we're going to do for a second reading. If those items aren't addressed, that were all talked about tonight, there won't just be one no vote, it'll probably be multiple no votes at that point, okay? But I don't think that's going to happen. Everything that's been talked about can be addressed, will be addressed, and will be put onto that thing. It's like, but you don't want surprises, I know that. But this is what the process is. You talk it through, come up with the things to make the adjustments that you need to do. And that's why it's an ordinance and not a resolution. Okay, the ordinance has to do the 2 readings, and it works out great, from that standpoint, because it gives the council an opportunity, the public an opportunity to address and talk about the items in advance, so you can go to that second reading and clarify what you have. The other ordinance, we had one a couple weeks ago. We put it in abeyance for about a month down the road yet, and things come back in August because we weren't happy with the way that whole thing was going. So that's the choices that we have. These are items on tonight's thing that we can address for the second reading, and there won't be any issues with that. So I'm comfortable with that, and I hope you'll be comfortable with it too down the road. But it's just part of the process that we need to go through. And Did you guys want to comment real quick?
I'm ready for a motion.
No, okay, I just want to make another comment.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'm comfortable with the process because this is new territory for us, and we need to start thinking out of the box as to how we might be putting relationships together as we begin planning, not just for something like this, which happens to give us the, not that it's an incubator company, but it's a company that's a really good startup. It started up strong, and now I believe we're going to be fortunate that they're coming and going to get their next 3 to 4 to 5 strong years. I mean, they say 3, it could be longer, you don't know, but if they do outgrow the space, then they are going to be looking for some other space. And hopefully it will be within Mount Dora, and that we'll have something available out in the Innovation District. So, you know, although there's this discomfort, this, to me, this is good. I like this because people had to put their heads together and negotiate and think differently to come up with how this could be accomplished. And this company has come out of the box so strong in their first 2.5 years, and what they're doing, which is what is the kind of clean industry out there we want, in the sense of it's not manufacturing and things like that. And I think it's wonderful because it's bringing 35 to 50 millenniums into town, and they're going to help us see different things about our town that if we want to be able to maintain our downtown and what it is, and at the same time prepare for growing our new town, we've got to understand that better. And I think this is an opportunity where we get to right in downtown. So I support moving forward with it, making the adjustments we need, and understanding that we will continue to do this as we bring other partnerships and other relationships to the table.
This company is, I think what we're looking at right now, this is the first one that we're doing. This is all part of the Innovation District, okay, when you want to look at it from that standpoint. And this fills what we've been talking about from going from the small to the large, the old city and the new city concept that we've talked about. It fills what we talked about, I think, about a month or so ago when we talked about that we're going to be, there's going to be companies coming out here to this area to look at. I think you need to know that the climate here in Mount Dora, which we're establishing tonight, that we are a city who's willing to talk, who's willing to negotiate, who's willing to talk to you about your future here in the city. This one here is, I think, is one of those good companies that's been growing in the past. They have a lot of great, if you go on their website, you're going to see a lot of great things that they work on as far as with Pixar and some other large companies, and with Disney and some others. So they're looking to, they will expand. This is an industry I think we're all like. And by the way, I think the term is millennial, not millenniums, and I think it's millennials. And but anyway, they're a company that will grow again. It's going to grow again to another level. Maybe it'll be 75 employees. It could even be the same 50. But there's going to be maybe requirements for that they might want to start looking into studio space. You know, to do a lot of their own animations in-house instead of maybe having to go rent other spaces to do some certain kinds of animations. We've seen those green rooms, blue rooms, and the outfits that you got to wear for some of the things that they have to do. So we are going to have that space ready because they're going to be looking maybe another, I would say, couple years that their next growth pattern will be coming into play, that they'll start thinking about it. And we're going to be right at the same time, like Dr. Lee mentioned before, that the next year or two before we start getting any companies, our ground's going to be ready really for the people anyway. So everything's fitting in really good, but again, it's like, I like the concept that we are talking about this, and we're putting ourselves in the play that we are looking for companies that are going to be here with open arms, talk to you, and especially like what Ms. Oak said, it's one of the companies that fits perfectly into the innovation terminology, and which is which is graphic arts and things like that.
I just want the rest of my colleagues here to know that I support the concept. I agree with you, Patty. It's just the execution of this packet that had me confused, bothered, whatever. We've got to follow our own ordinances, and we need to have the complete packet. But I agree. I think we're an open city. We're welcoming. We are on the cusp of really great things, and I think we need to pursue, clean industry. And like I said, conceptually, I'm all for it. It's just the execution and I fully understand this is the first time we've done it, and so we've got a little growing pains. But let's get it right for the second reading.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Follow-on, if I may.
Okay.
I want to make one follow-on comment. I don't want my colleagues to read my comments as negative, because I like the concept as well. I appreciate the vision that you've illustrated, and it's why I asked the question. Is this the first one we've done? And you would expect in the first exercise to have some hiccups. All I want to see is help you all who prepare and support these packages to give me the information I need to make wise decisions with, and I'll do that. I don't have any problem with foregoing $30,000 over 3 years in tax revenue to plant this kind of seed money for the possibilities this company brings. I just want you to get it right. We should follow our own ordinance, 78.550, which is the ordinance, our ordinance, that grants the exception, and the language says, it shall have the following included. And by golly, it ought to be there. And I think we all understand each other now. And if these things were here, we wouldn't have needed Mr. Clinker, because we'd have a finance director's report. And when you read this ordinance and become familiar with it, the director that the ordinance is talking about is Vince at Planning and Zoning. He's the daddy rabbit for this, and the finance director supports him in terms of the finance officer's report. I commend you. First time through, it ain't all that bad. The patient's going to live. Let's get on and get it done right.
Mr. Decker?
Yeah, I just want to, again, support. I support this 100%. I just think it's our first time through. I think we made errors. I think it was, to be honest, I think it was somewhat sloppy. But I agree with it. I want this to go through. I think it's again, great seed money. I want Steamroller to succeed. I want G3 to benefit. And I just think the package didn't have everything it should have had in it. And thank you.
Okay.
I move
approval. Motion 2011.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second, and we have all discussions we needed to have. Ms. Johns, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes, we did.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for taking a trip here tonight, so you can, Mr. Levy, or Dr. Levy. Thank you. And also thank you for your all the work that you did on this project, and I know you did quite a bit, so thank you very much.
Exceptional.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
Before Dr. Levy leaves to go home, and he deserves to be able to go home tonight, I took a boondoggle this weekend and drove down to Lake Nona. If you all have not gone to visit Lake Nona, give yourself a treat and go look with an idea of vision for the future. I commend you for the work that you have done for Lake Nona, and I wanted to say that before you got out of here tonight and tell you how much Mount Dora appreciates the guidance that you give us now. Thank you.
You're here. It is beautiful. I've been there.
Okay, on to city manager reports. Ms. Hayes.
Yes, Mayor, council members, the department accomplishments is included in your packet that we typically provide you the first week of the month, so that is now in there for the month of May. I would just draw attention to some general information we put in this report. If you look at page 2386 at the bottom, it says purchasing, and there are several RFPs listed in there so that you're aware of the RFPs that we have let or we have put out for bid. And that you may be able to see an update and a status on that on a regular basis. So we do try to put that information out there so that you can, again, just for your information, for the public's information. Anyone that's looking for an RFP, also they could go to the same location and find that information. So I just point that out as a point of interest. There are also some other good information in here, I believe. This particular one, you can look at the electric utility and see some of the things that Charles has going on, as well as some of the other departments. But again, especially if you've got a project you're looking for an update on, you will probably find it in this information. If we haven't spoken about it during our meetings, look here first, and then please, let me know. But we do put this out there. It's available to everyone, and
board appointments, I have one, and we had a recent resignation on the CRA, Mr. Bernard. Bill, I want to thank you very much for serving, and appreciate that. And I'd like to appoint Akhtar Hussain, owns the Village Coffee Pot, and as being the replacement to fill out this term.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. And is there any other, there's no other report of things tonight, right? That's it. City Attorney's report.
You got a fake one for us. It's nice.
what's that?
Got a fake one for us.
Fake one?
Yeah.
Well, I already knocked over my laptop. I think I've done enough for tonight.
Okay.
Cause
We'll give
enough emotion tonight.
we'll give you that one. Okay. Ms. Tillett, you're up.
I'm up, huh?
You're up.
So if you do the pledge, you get to go first? Is that-
No, it's
I'm just kidding.
next week, Mr.
I only have one thing. I would like to push, I guess, to have live streaming of our workshops on Facebook, or some way so that the general public doesn't have to wait to, listen to audios. We do it for regular meetings. I don't think, I understand that Lisa has the administration powers to be type of thing, but, and isn't always here during the workshop hours, but I would think that could be easily, at least administration, transferred to somebody else on staff to do that. It's not only helps provide transparency, but I think we learn a lot at workshops, and I think it's a great way of getting the information that we're learning out to the general public. And as you well know, from 3 to 5, a lot of people are working. They can check in with Facebook when they get home and see the highlights. So if it's going to cost money, I'd like it to be added to the budget drill for this year. But so anyway, that's my thought. I want to see our workshops on Facebook as well as our meetings. Thanks.
May I add a comment? Okay. This evening I felt that same pang when we had spent an hour working on the playground in workshop. And for those in the audience who were not here for the workshop, they were woefully uninformed about the things that we had agonized over for the hour. We went ahead with the playground renovation. We may get questions from that from people who didn't participate in that discussion or the workshop avenues that we explored together. And I wish that it were available too. I wanted to make some explanation. There was some pregnant pause that we should have been able to share. And if we live stream the workshop, and it won't intimidate me in terms of expressing my opinion, we all do that. We're all comfortable with that. I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to explore that idea as well. Thank you.
And Ms. Tillett. Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. One reminder, this coming Saturday, Juneteenth, is going on in MLK Center. I urge everybody to show up. I think it's 10 to 10, or am I right about that?
3 to 9.
3 p.m. to 9
3
p.m.
o'clock to
3 to 9.
3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I'll show up to help set up, maybe. At any rate, 2 to 10. through the.
Yeah, it officially starts at 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Well, you heard it here. At any rate, it, I think, behooves as many as can to go there and show that support. It's a good time for, and it certainly shows the support for the Northeast community. So I urge you to attend, and as a reminder, that's the only reason I'm mentioning it. And lastly, 2,395 pages. Mayor, I think you did a fantastic job of leading this council through that morass. And it was, it's certainly my record in my tenure times 3 at least. I think 900 some pages was the most I've ever been involved in. So, well done, Ms. Hayes. I know there are good reasons for it, and it'll be, I'm sure it'll be a record, I hope, for a long time.
You should have really seen the shock on Misty's face when she compiled it.
Could we combine all those papers and stuff into just one set for all of the, anything that?
It has to be alone, again.
The standalones.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Standalones, yeah.
Talk to our city attorney about that. She requires that. We better listen. At any rate, that's all I have. I appreciate the patience, and we, considering all the stuff we had to go through, we're really in good shape, I think. And we did. I'm so impressed what we did in the last item. You maybe heard that in my emotional. I compliment Mr. Massey for catching that the technocratic glitches for not including everything, and it is important in my view. I agree to have all of that statutory requirement in the document. Some inappraising lawyer that didn't like it might be challenging it otherwise, so it's a good idea to do that. Anyway, thank you very much, and I think we did well tonight. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker?
Just very briefly, you put your memory caps on. A couple weeks ago, there was a volcano in Guatemala, and a friend of mine is a missionary, and she's reached out to me and asked if I could help try to obtain some material. And some of the items they need down there is actually fire equipment. And I talked to Ms. Hayes, and I talked to the chief. We've got some protective gear that is basically surplus in the department. It's out of date, and it's they cannot use it. So with everyone's permission, I will follow up with the chief, obtain that material, and get it mailed off to Guatemala.
If we can do that, I support it.
Absolutely.
It's within the regulations to do that, yes.
We'll put it on the surplus list just so it's recorded. Sorry, we'll put it on the surplus list just so that it is recorded properly, but I have no issue with it, and Chief does not either.
Yeah,
Just so we are legally protected.
yeah, it's I actually, when I'm talking to Chief Greiner, he kind of smiled because they said they were looking for a way to try to get rid of it. So, and several of our guests out here in the audience, I noticed a couple of people who were here during the workshop, but we started at 3 and they're still here, so I want to thank you for being here. Should be commended.
Okay, Mr. Creel.
I think we've had some good discussions and made some good decisions, and the discussions and the decisions were made better by the group as a whole, and I appreciate that. Good cooperation, and I think, as Mr. Rawson said, a good meeting and a good, we accomplished a great deal. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Mr. Massey.
I've probably said enough tonight, but I do feel compelled to say thank you for the opportunity to live with you, to serve with you, to share with you, and to learn and grow with you. It too has been a very good evening. Thank you.
Ms. Oaks.
Ditto, but I do want to say, now, Friends of the Library is having a sale of books down at the library this week. It started Monday, it runs till Friday. All kinds of books, 1945 Life magazines, all kinds. All the money we raise will go towards our commitment to the Children's Library expansion. Being a small group, we committed and have allocated 50,000, but we're going after another 25 to help. So if you need some books, go down there. Plus, we have a little side store where a lot of residents are so good to the library. They donated all kinds of little goodies. So we've been having our little trash and treasures sale in the side room. So Monday through Friday, today's Tuesday, so you got a couple more days. Go down and help us earn a little more money so that we can give a bigger commitment to the library for the children's.
Great. Thank you. Okay, nobody is ever going to accuse this city council of not being transparent. That is for sure. And I think that's something Ms. Hayes started, and actually it was kind of started a little bit prior to that, but she's really put an emphasis on it as far as making sure that everything that this council does, sees, touches, smells, eats, whatever, is put out on the website and in one fashion or another. So it's a commender for that and making sure that it's out there. And it's more than I can't read that much all at one time. This actually, my computer, it started at 100% before tonight, and it just went out. Battery just went dead on it. So I don't know if these are good batteries for this thing or not, but anyway, the one thing I do want to mention that's going to be coming up on a future agenda item, and I failed to mention it at our last meeting, and I got a request from the county and for Mount Dora to amend its animal ordinance to include an ordinance that they just did for their for a ban on selling dogs and cats. Okay, and it's and so no, we don't have that. It's they did. The county has it, and it's just basically they send a copy of it, and Ms. Hayes is putting it on one of our future agendas coming up here. So you'll get a copy. It was just going to be a one paragraph. We don't have to go into the full detail on it that the county did with theirs, and it's just basically if we don't do it, let's put it this way: Mount Dora would be the only community in Lake County that will allow dogs and cats to be sold from basically the backs of cars in the city. Something like that. Isn't that right? Okay.
And it excludes the,
it excludes places like, pet, those places that do are, there's allow things because they deal with rescues, adoptions, things like that. So it's a totally different thing. So it's really something I know that that I've been approached very quickly is when they passed theirs to do that, and unfortunately didn't get a chance to do it at the last month. So it will be coming up on a Ford ordinance, and it'll be a 2-reading thing. Just add the one paragraph at the end. The last one we adopted last time was the anti-tethering ordinance to ours. This is going to be the banning of the sale of dogs and cats. Okay. With that, motion for adjournment.